me, I'm fucking deep in Tennessee with my brothers from the 3. We quick to click and break the peace. No respect for what they think.
Yo, what's good, everybody? What up, YouTube world? It's your boy SBX coming to you once again with another wrestling talk. And this time I want to talk about the dark side of the ring. I know it's been going on for a while on Vice, on YouTube, and also on the network. Anyways, I've seen a little bit of the documentaries talking about certain wrestlers when they face their deaths or whatever. I remember the last one I saw was the Von Aaron's death. Basically how some of the Von Aaron family had pretty much died from other criteria when it comes to steroids, drug abuse, and stuff like that. And when it comes to wrestling, it's been going on. It had been going on since the 80s and the 90s and early 2000s or whatnot. But basically, we're going to just focus on one particular guy. This guy has been one of the good technical wrestlers from, if you watch anything between, the 1980s New Japan Pro Wrestling, WCW, and WWE, or WWF, I'm talking about Chris Benoit. Chris Benoit is known for many things as a technical wrestler, nicknames like, Crippler, Canadian Crippler, and, the Pegasus Kid, stuff like that. Chris Benoit has been dedicated to do wrestling for 20 years. I've watched his match from the WCW days and WWF days, WWE days, and whatnot. And, he was a phenomenal wrestler, but, despite the fact that, during the dark times where, him and the late Eddie Guerrero died, and it caused a lot of grief for Chris Benoit and the WWE and the fans and the family of Eddie Guerrero, of course, Vicky Guerrero. But I just feel like, this documentary, because I've seen other documentaries discuss about Chris Benoit and whatnot, and despite the fact that with, how Chris Benoit pretty much shattered his fate and, killed his wife Nancy Benoit and killed his son Daniel, I just feel like, I remember when this happened around 2006, and Chris Benoit pretty much was dealing with a lot of mental problems, of course, and substance abuse, and he took his frustration onto his family, pretty much hurting his wife, drugging his wife, and as far as the kid, his son, Chris Benoit left a lot of fans, friends, his oldest son David Benoit, and his father. I don't know if he's still alive or not, but he left a lot of people behind, and something that he loved doing was wrestling, but I feel like I can't even give you my conclusion on how I feel about, in the end of what went down. I'm gonna tell you this, this is my opinion, so, you can agree or disagree. But to me, I feel like Chris Benoit was not really in his mental state, because of the fact that he'd been traveling all year round and wrestled, and when it comes to the WWE, they travel every year all year round. Let me be specific. All year round. And they're sacrificing their bodies. Body slam, submission, chair shots, get hit from tables and ladders, falling off on ladders, and cages and stuff like that, you know. Wrestling is, people will say it's fake, yes, but it has some dangers. So you can't say that wrestling is entirely fake because these injuries are real. You know, that's if you understand the concept of wrestling. I understand wrestling pretty well. You know, it's just like, how would you do if you were a random crazy kid just doing God knows what, and later on would suffer the repercussions if they hurt themselves, you know? But at the end of the day, wrestling is very choreographic, you know? And anyways, based on Chris Benoit's death, this guy had hit a lot of swan don headbutts, chair shots, crashed through tables, a lot of stuff. And when it comes to that, it's where he gets a lot of concussions. A lot, besides Chris Benoit, a lot of wrestlers had dealt with, you know, concussions or CTE. You know what I mean? Besides wrestlers, there's football players as well. They get more concussions too because they've been tackled down on the ground. But with Chris Benoit's case, his mental state was so fucked up that he managed to have a brain capacity of an 80-year-old man, like having dementia and things like that. I saw on the early segments of the documentary, not the Dark Side of the Ring, but just the NBC or ESPN type of interview, and they're talking about how Chris Benoit was mentally unstable. So it's kind of like Chris Benoit had to be like, you know, in a way of being treated like an old man, and everybody had to make sure he was safe and, you know, things like that, you know, because he can't do everything on his own in some aspects, you know. And he was in his late 30s and his early 40s, and he has that brain damage and concussion as if he had dementia, like he's like an old man. So people may say, based on how he not only killed his family but killed himself, people would assume that this is they might assume that this is premeditated murder. Some people might say this is roid rage, you know, taking so much steroids and stuff like that. I feel like at the end of the day, I can't even say it just happened. And sometimes, most of the times, I'll say this, that when it comes to substance abuse, drugs, alcohol, a person's mind state is a lot different. You know, when you drink alcohol, when you get drunk, you're on a whole different plateau. Your mind is different. I mean, you're your same person, but you look at things in a different aspect, you know. When you're miserable, when you get high, you're happy. And when you're happy, when you take drugs, you're sad, angry, or whatever. Sometimes alcohol and drugs do that to you. But, and like I said, with Chris Benoit's case, it's like he was taking so much steroids, and sometimes with people who have steroids, their testosterone level is so high that it's like there's so much adrenaline in the brain, and it causes you to do some crazy shit, you know, because of the fact that he was not in the mental state of being who he was. Chris Benoit felt like the depression he dealt with the loss of his friend Eddie Guerrero. I feel like it makes sense on some aspects because, you know, if you saw his video, the WWE tribute to Eddie Guerrero, you know, how he was crying and breaking down in tears and stuff like that. It's like, you know, you could see the emotion running through his face, you know. But like I said, with Chris Benoit, you already know that everything was just out of proportion. So basically around 2006, when Chris Benoit had to cancel the pay-per-view event, I think it was Vengeance of 2006, at that time I was not really frequently watching the WWE, but I still kind of knew what was going on some aspects. But what I can tell you is this, though. I'm going to say it like this, though. That day of the murder in Fayetteville, Georgia, I feel like that really changed the WWE. And that's why the WWE is what it is today. Because of the fact that they're really strict on the wellness policy and changing the whole TV 14 to TV PG and stuff like that to make WWE still relevant, but at the same time to keep their wrestlers in check. Now, I don't blame the WWE for having a wellness policy and being strict on it. No wrestler should be out there taking unprescripted drugs or drugs that they don't need in their system. Like, for instance, you know, it's a contradiction, but half of these wrestlers are out there are pumping the juice, you know. But at the end of the day, it's like WWE had to change their aspects. I mean, yes, WWE kind of sucks at this moment, and people are watching other wrestling platforms like AEW, Impact Wrestling, Ring of Honor, New Japan, All Japan, etc., etc. But what I can tell you is that wrestling as a business is very tough. You gotta keep your money in check. You gotta keep your body in check. You gotta keep the fans in check. You gotta keep everything in check. And even if you have an injury, with WWE, it's like even if you're injured, it's like they want you to continue. The show must go on in their mindset. As far as other wrestling promotions, if they suffer an injury, I mean, you can take a leave of absence. WWE do 2 unless they feel like you actually at the point like, yeah, you gotta do it. Or, you know, they can tell you that you can go home. But I feel like wrestlers break their asses and break their necks all year round to entertain us, you know. So, like I said, WWE should be a little considerate on, I mean, I know they are, but I think they should be very considerate more based on wrestlers' injuries. Because, like I said, because if their injuries are not treated, they're going to go through somewhere that they can subsidize the pain by taking painkillers and steroids and all the antibiotics. You know, there's so many wrestlers out there doing drugs and on and off on drugs, you know, because of how much the wrestling business can traumatize people. Getting hit by chairs, getting slammed through the hard ring and get hit by the ring post and etc., etc. You know, so when it comes to Chris Benoit's case, it's like, you know, he had suffered so much pain, neck injury, brain, mental, all that. If Chris Benoit was a fucking wreck, mentally and physically and spiritually, you know. And I have to say, it do make people go crazy, you know. But Chris Benoit never, ever in his life, ever stopped loving what he loved to do was wrestling. Wrestling was his passion. Outside of that, he was a Christian man and things like that, you know. But what I can really say is that he went into a dark path. So I can't judge the fact that Chris Benoit was in a fucked up state of mind and leading to what he did, killing his wife and son and taking his own life. You know, and it's a sign that it's major depression going on. You know, but his wife Nancy was also doing drugs as well. And when you have a negative environment, a dysfunctional family is going to put you in some type of self-destruction mode, you know. But I kind of wish that Chris Benoit never in his life did this, you know. I wish the WWE could have handled his situation a lot better. You know, WWE had lost a lot of wrestlers over the years based on, you know, injuries like Owen Hart and Eddie Guerrero dying from a heart attack or whatever, you know. But at the end of the day, what is sad though is kind of like, yes, he deserved it, but Chris Benoit was blacklisted and he was erased from the WWE world. Like, this dude really doesn't exist at this point. So nobody can never mention his name at all. So because of the fact that he killed his family and killed himself, it makes sense why WWE would not put him in the Hall of Fame, because they're not going to induct a killer, you know. But at the end of the day, it makes sense. I can't be mad at WWE for doing that. But I was mad at the fact that WWE could have done a little bit better with Chris Benoit. Like, Chris Benoit, I mean, like I said, he was pushed to be a main eventer, which it was good. But just like how he did with Hogan, Cena, Stone Cold, Rock, all of these big wrestlers, you know, all those big wrestlers, they keep their self in check. They prioritize them more. But if anything, Chris Benoit took a lot of shit than most wrestlers have. I mean, I think everybody's equal, but in my opinion, Chris Benoit had took a lot of damages. That's my opinion. Because of the fact that he had neck injury, spinal injury, whatever, CTE, mild dementia, things like that. Chris Benoit was not physically and mentally and spiritually okay. You know, I believe deep down he wanted to live his life being a wrestler the way he anticipated to be. But when you put drugs into a person's system, then they're gonna be a whole different person. So it's not like, I can't really say it's malice. I don't know what was going on in the Benoit family. I don't know if there was, like, I know there was some drama and dysfunction in some family, and there's another side that they're a happy family. But Chris Benoit, deep down, he was not happy with what was going on in his life. So, again, it's fucked up. He did that. I'm not going to support everything on his behalf. I respect Chris Benoit as a wrestler, just like how Dean Malenko would say, you can't forget or forgive what he did. Same thing with Nancy Benoit's sister. I would never forgive him. It's gonna take time. It's been a decade. It's gonna take more than that to forgive Chris Benoit. Especially he's dead. You can't accept his apologies if he's dead. You know. But at the end of the day, we all humans. We need to remind ourselves that we make mistakes each and every day. You know, rather if it's premeditated or the influence on drugs and alcohol. In my case, it's already proven that he did it. I'ma still respect him as a wrestler, but as an individual who fucked his life over, I can't respect that. I can only respect Chris Benoit as a wrestler. That's all I can say. I don't believe that he deserved to be a Hall of Fame. I don't know, maybe in the future there's going to be another way to honor his wrestling, honor him as a wrestler, but I don't know if they're going to ever honor him as a person. I don't believe that nobody should honor him as a person for what he done. I'm not going to say that what he did over the years from New Japan, WCW, and WWF and WWE, his work was never good enough. His work was tremendous over these years in different companies. But at the end of the day, as a person, it's unforgivable. So, all I can say is that, you know, I love wrestling. There are some things that I like and don't like about some aspects about wrestling. But at the end of the day, this is our childhood. This is our scapegoat from reality. These wrestlers who are our heroes. You know, we gotta honor them. You know, like I said, people like Jim Ross, commentators, they're all our heroes. You know, and people who was in that documentary, like Jim Ross, Chavo Guerrero, Chris Jericho. You know, his son David, who speak about it. You know, they talked about how it affected them. You know, and so much at even Jim Ross. Like Jim Ross is a really stand-up guy, and you know he worked with wrestlers all his WWE career and outside of WWE. He has a very keen idea of how he works with wrestlers, and he stick by them, you know, in some aspects, you know, depends on the wrestler, you know. But it was sad that Jim Ross couldn't go to Chris Benoit's funeral, and same thing with his son and his wife, you know, because that Nancy's side of the family and her sister didn't want no WWE officials to be around them, you know. Let's be real, WWE can be shady, so I wouldn't be surprised if they feel some type of way about it. But I was kind of disappointed that they wouldn't allow Jim Ross to be in the funeral, you know. But I still give props for Chavo and Chris Jericho still looking out for David, you know. But at the end of the day, though, guys, if I knew Chris Benoit as a person, I mean, I would have mixed feelings too. I really agree about what Vicky Guerrero did. Her feelings about it. She was mad about Chris and also didn't want to attend the funeral, you know. I mean, if you think about it, it makes sense, you know. But at the end of the day, you know, I will be mad if WWE wrestlers and Vince McMahon will give pity, but they have their bullshit pity. How Nancy's sister look at it, like a bullshit type of sympathy, you know, and they're not there to be there for the family or whatnot. But I'll say, at the end of the day, people who've been around Chris Benoit, like Chris Jericho, Dean Malenko, Chavo Guerrero, anybody who, the funeral was so private that not a lot of people were there, So I guess it makes sense, But at the end of the day, guys, as a person who grew up in the 90s watching WCW and WWF, Chris Benoit, like I said, was one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, doing crippler cross faces and swan non headbutts and things like that. Part of the WCW later era where he was part of the 7 Horsemen, the 5 Horsemen, shit, not 7, the 4. Damn, I'm fucking up my memory. 5, 6, 7. The 4 Horsemen, with Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Dean Malenko, you know what I'm saying? But anyways, all I can say, guys, is that, again, Chris Benoit was a very good wrestler. He did so much for WCW. He did so much more with WWE. And it sucks that his legacy had to be flushed down the toilet because of that situation that happened in June of 2006. So I can't even say, guys, rest in peace to him. I don't even know he's in heaven or hell or a different afterlife. But I can only say that, Chris Benoit, in my opinion, even though the WWE will erase his existence, but anybody who's a hardcore wrestling fan, his work will never be missing. I still believe in his legacy. It may sound fucked up. His legacy still continues as a person who is a wrestling fan since the 90s. So anyways, guys, it's been real. I'd love to know everybody's opinion. Please leave your comments on the comment sections below. Make sure you hit that bell icon, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Until then, folks, SBX wrapping us up. Thanks for watching. Peace out.